each other sick, or at least with a mitigated fear of us getting each other sick. So I want to talk to you about this project that we did with Autism Society. To introduce myself, I'm Kevin Mahler. I am an Omaha resident. I own my own business, which is called Contributed Line LLC, and I am a fundraising consultant. And I've worked with Autism Society for about 3.5 years. And Autism Society of Nebraska is a statewide organization that addresses autism from a social perspective. So there are great medical resources and decent government resources for people on the spectrum as well as their family members. But Autism Society really exists in the area of providing social support and peer-to-peer events where people who are in some way affected by autism can get together and have community. So that's what Autism Society has been doing for the last 40 plus years. But because the organization was in a pattern of pizza party, mom's night out, video game night for teens on the spectrum, it was really a oh crap moment. When COVID hit, as everybody says, when COVID hit, it was really an oh crap moment because it was like we are built on getting together in person for community and putting Facebook aside and just being together as human beings. So who are we and what do we do in a world where we can't physically gather? So like all of you, we pivoted to Zoom, we pivoted to virtual events, and that was great. But our traditional events-based way of raising money was compromised. So when the CARES Act filtered down to the state of Nebraska and opportunities became available to request funding for special initiatives that provided some kind of response and recovery to communities that nonprofits serve. We really jumped at the opportunity. So this DHHS opportunity came up. There did not appear to be a cap on how much money you could request. Maybe it was something in the hundreds of thousands, but we really, me and the board, got together and said, what can we do? What can we do that's response and recovery? Because the DHHS is granting money to organizations that will do something to improve the lives of people during this time and help organizations stay afloat if they're somehow directly addressing people impacted by the pandemic. So I don't have to tell you all that people with disabilities were disproportionately affected by the pandemic. But specifically in our autism community, there was this one story that helped us see a greater problem that we knew was happening statewide. And that story is this. So, that's why I have the band here. It was a hot morning in April, and some people with disabilities were floating into a van to get to work to their supported employment program. I hope I'm using that term correctly. And the person who was in charge of getting everyone on the van and checking their temperature and asking questions about, do you feel sick today? Have you been exposed to anyone with COVID? In the last 14 days, have you experienced any of the following symptoms? Everyone who was loading onto the van that day said no, and like, yeah, we're fine, we don't have COVID, we don't think we have COVID, we don't have any symptoms. And so everyone got on the van. But it became clear to the employee or the social worker that someone wasn't feeling well. So when the employee approached this individual said that they were just feeling kind of hot, and they didn't look well, and they were, I don't know, they just didn't look well, and so they actually took the person's temperature again and saw that the person was indeed running a fever, and promptly got everyone out of the van. That person, the individual, went on to test positive for COVID, and so it really forced everyone who was in that scenario and their family members to ask, what happened here? How did someone, with a average or to high IQ get on a van with a bunch of people with the knowledge of COVID, but they didn't think to answer any of these questions in the affirmative? And through some question and answer, it was determined that the individual didn't equate feeling hot with feeling bad, or having elevated temperatures and equating that with feeling symptomatic. And I hope this is resonating with some of you, because there's also a culture in assistive behavior sometimes to encourage compliance, encourage agreeability, and so perhaps this individual was also pre-primed to go along, say the right answer, and make the person in authority happy. So it really highlighted for us, wow, being able to express what one is feeling in one's body is quite a challenge sometimes for everybody, but especially to people on the spectrum who have, been shown to maybe not have the best ability to read one's body and express it into terms that others will understand. So we thought, what can we do about this? Can we somehow create a communication campaign where we can explain symptoms of COVID to people on the spectrum, to people in our community? So I guess I'll tell the fast version of the story, which is that yes, we, in a period of about a week, we dreamed up a communication campaign that would basically be a website that would feature expert content, videos, and articles about how to read one's body. And there's a special word for this. My friend, Kelly Mahler, who has the same exact last name as me, but we are not related, she's a scholar in Pennsylvania who has come to speak in Nebraska in the last several years to talk about this concept of interoception, of the eighth sense. So we have 5 senses, and then in the early 2000s there was a movie about the 6th sense, which I never saw that. And then in the meantime, someone's discovered the 7th sense. I don't know what that is. But the 8th sense is interoception, of being able to sense what an internal feeling in your body, and I think to translate that into words that others can understand. So we thought, okay, there'll be a website, and the website will be the pillar. That will be the format where every piece of information lives about how to deal with COVID, how to deal with isolation, how to deal with quarantining, how to deal with fears of the pandemic, like I was talking about when I started speaking. But it would probably be a good idea to not have everything live online. We probably need to have a print campaign of this, and there probably needs to be some kind of video element where we can introduce this to the community. So we built we kind of wrote up a project description and developed a generous budget to make sure that we could pay all the experts to dedicate their time to write and record videos for us. And it resulted in this beautiful website right here, which I will walk you through. We came up with 6 pillars of information about the project that I don't think we need to get into today, but the meat is really right here. How to protect yourself from COVID-19. This would be an example of something that has not really aged well. I think we all know this by now. Now, I will say that this was developed specifically by people with knowledge of both autism and the medical world, specifically people at UNMC. You know, in June of 2021, we all know this now. So even though that this isn't particularly hot at this moment in time, I believe the other ones really have durability that extend beyond the pandemic and get to this idea of interoception and how to create better understanding of, among people on the spectrum, how to read one's body and explain it to others. And then also prime the medical community for, hey, not everyone is going to speak the same language that you do. And sometimes, you know, you've got to dig a little deeper if you happen to know that the person is on the spectrum. So then we have becoming a better health self-advocate. And there are lessons here, such as about body sensations or feelings, how to communicate with healthcare providers, talking about some conventions in how doctors ask questions and how they're used to receiving answers, and then how to manage anxiety for healthcare appointments. So hopefully, as I'm going through this, you all are thinking of someone in your lives who could benefit from a little bit of learning about the conventions of visiting a doctor. And you can check it out at autismstaysafe.org, which I'll share the web address again at the end. So here's a peek into how to identify and understand body sensations or feelings. I won't wear you out on this one, but I just want to give an example of how we were writing to the community, writing directly to people on the spectrum, not about people on the spectrum. Because Lord knows there's enough talking over the heads of people on the spectrum. We know that people on the spectrum consume content just as much as everybody else, if not more, and we wanted to speak directly to people. So here's an example. Noticing how your body is feeling is an important skill. The feelings in your body can provide important clues to your health. For example, noticing a runny nose or a sore throat or a headache could provide clues that you are getting sick and might need to see a doctor. Then we move on to a review of the information. Then we move on to how to practice the information with a video. Then after practice, we do reflection. So this model of presenting information, to back up, is based on BST, Behavioral Skills Training, where information is provided to the client by first introducing the idea, then reviewing the idea, then we're going to practice the skill that we're talking about, and then we're going to reflect on how did it go? What did you notice? We just did something together. What was it like for you? And the final pillar that I want to talk about today is navigating healthcare conversations. And some subtopics in there are how to share health concerns with others, asking someone to accompany you to a medical appointment, and communicating health needs to employees or to employers and teachers. So here's just a short example of this. I am clicking into YouTube now. I hope this goes well. So this is going to be a video, just a little sample of probably 40 videos that we recorded. And
hey Jennifer, are you ready for us to do something? Yeah, sure. Okay, so I'm really not feeling very well, and my stomach kind of hurts, and my throat is kind of sore, and so I'm thinking about actually probably go to the doctor. Would you be able to take me?
Yeah, Elizabeth, I'm so sorry that you're not feeling well. I actually just took Joe the other day.
Yeah.
And when I took him, they didn't let me in.
Oh, okay, yeah. Thank you for reminding me. I guess I didn't really think about that. Maybe you can help me write down some things to say to the doctor in case I didn't have to go there myself.
Yeah, I actually have some paper and pen.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
You know, it might be a good idea to call the doctor before we head there to see what to do.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe you can help me write down some things to say to the doctor before. Okay, cool.
okay, so that was one of 40 videos, 40-ish videos on the site. And what we saw there was just an example of what it looks like when a person asks their friend to accompany them to a doctor. And also instructively, what it looks like to appropriately respond to your friend on the spectrum when they ask you to accompany them. But we definitely did not want to put more burden on people on the spectrum and just have this be a campaign about what can you on the spectrum do to improve your own life. Of course, self-empowerment is a great thing, but we also say that it takes two to tango here, and that's healthcare providers. They've got to be aware that people are not always going to communicate in the way that we learned about in med school. People are going to communicate in circular ways. They're going to talk about the issue indirectly. They may go off on a tangent, but there's a truth here about the symptoms. And it may take people on the spectrum or whoever they are, different communication styles, may take them 40 minutes to get to the real story. So, there's ways to maybe compress that intro to get to the urgent health issue. But the problem with this, of talking to doctors in this moment, is they're all saving us. They're all working overtime and being overloaded at the moment that we were going to be asking them to be aware of a new thing. So we really wanted to be appreciative to their work. So we wrote a letter, a thank you letter to healthcare professionals that thanked them for being there for all of us. And we tried to get it published in some Nebraska newspapers, but we did not have any takers on that. But we wanted this to be run in the editorial pages throughout Nebraska, and that didn't quite happen, but that's okay. But because we uploaded it to our website and we printed copies that we also sent around the state, that basically just says, thank you for saving us right now, but We want you to be aware that you're going to be seeing some people now and throughout your career that have different ways of communicating their health concerns. And here are some things that you can do. So we provided 3 written resources. We provided a guide for medical professionals, how to help a patient with autism navigate a healthcare appointment successfully. So, not some long academic paper, a 2-pager with very clear how-tos. And this might be surprising to you, but this information did not exist prior, at least not as far as we could tell through Google. Second item was sensory stimuli that can be a challenge for a person with autism. Meaning, if you are a doctor and there's a loud air conditioning unit outside your window and there are children screaming and there are people looking stressed out popping in and out of your office while you're having patient visits, what is the impact on your patient with this kind of stimuli? And thirdly, a little more context on this concept of interoception. And that is actually a video that Kelly Mahler created independently, but we knew that doctors and healthcare professionals that were interested, this would be very interesting to them. We also included a section on here for caregivers and family members of people on the spectrum, which included a message about, hey, your loved one may not be in the habit of looking at this kind of website themselves. How can you read it on their behalf? And what can you do to make this website work for your loved one who may be a little bit reticent to engage with it independently. And then a letter, specifically to people on the spectrum, which we call the "It's Not Your Fault" letter, which is like, hey, you might do all these skills right. All the things we taught in these how-tos and videos, you may do everything just like it is written. And you still may walk out feeling unheard or that you were undertreated or overtreated. And we just want you to be aware that you didn't fail here. That we gave you the how-tos, but it's not necessarily because you did something wrong. I mean, the fault may lie with the medical provider. The blog kind of chronicles some of the offline activity we did, such as, we didn't want to just make this website, send out an email through Constant Contact, and put a post up on Facebook and say, we did it. We really wanted to reach into people. We know that people are inundated with announcements of new websites every single day, every single hour. So we wanted to go beyond the traditional methods of announcing this and create some cool posters. So we engaged an artist who lives in Omaha and is on the spectrum herself. Her name is Erin Casey. Her name used to be Erin Human. And I think she's brilliant. And she created these images for us, and then we worked with a graphic designer to have some Autism Society imagery imposed on that. Sorry about that. I got to turn something off here. And we also used the artistic work of Janisa Neal, who is an artist on the spectrum that lives in the Omaha area as well. And she created this beautiful picture that we turned into a poster as well about self-advocacy and empowering yourself to advocate for your own healthcare needs. We also created some brochures, which I have for you on the table today with all the other brochures, and we made some magnets too, so that this project would stay top of mind for the full year and get as much traffic and utility as possible. And then we did something very difficult, which I think only Autism Society of Nebraska could do. When you look at the statewide, or actually when you look at the autism organizations in this state, I think Autism Society of Nebraska, I know, I'm just trying to be humble, ASN is the only one with a statewide reach. So, we reached out to our friends in these top 10 cities, plus Scotts Bluff, because you gotta have the Panhandle in there, to get these materials, to get the print materials physically in the hands of the clinics and the community leaders in these cities, and then we did a few other cities as they came up. But we knew that if the print stuff could get to them, that it would be more likely that they would dive deep into the great digital content. Here's some art that Aaron did that we didn't have time to use. Well, I think we used that one. This is really cool because it was showing the concept of the spread and the concept of like who's in your bubble and how interconnected we all are as we were reminded through this terrible disease. 2 shopping carts apart and is approximately 6 feet of distance, maybe a little more. And then I like this one because it illustrates the virus coming out of someone's mouth and air passageways and how a mask can protect you. So we're wrapping up here, but here are some of the people that worked on this project together. So Megan and Annette and I worked together every day on this. And then the major contributors were Kim Clary, who is a lady who's on the spectrum, but she's also an occupational therapist. And she, had great insight as both being on the spectrum and having a deep knowledge of OT. So she created a lot of great content with her colleague, Kelly Mahler. And then Kelly Ellerbush and Cynthia Ellis are Nebraskans who provided some medical content. And then these 3 ladies here, Dr. Diane Martai, who diagnoses a lot of people on the spectrum who are kind of hard to diagnose, or maybe they've made it to age 39 like me, and they've always suspected that something is different about them, but she's very good at diagnosing people who didn't show up as autistic on the traditional metrics. The way I said that makes me say that I am on the spectrum, which I don't think I am, but I just wanted to talk about being 39. Because I'm going to be 40 next year, and I'm trying to think of a cool party to have for myself. And Carol Sulzer and Dr. Natalie Swift are both psychotherapists in Nebraska, and they help direct those students that you saw in the video. And they provided some great content about dealing with the psychological aspects of self-advocacy, health self-advocacy. Dr. White is a dentist, and he helped provide some content about how to do a dentist appointment. We have some good content about that on the website. And Rachel Ray is at UNMC, and she helped us distribute the survey, and it kind of was a gut check in the medical world for, is this content going to resonate with healthcare providers? Is this content going to resonate with patients? And then some of these project volunteers are just other people who provided insight and promotion of the project. We worked with Motley Marketing to build the website. That's MALY in Lincoln, and our videographer was O City Media. So, durability is the word that I'm thinking of now because, you know, it really looks like this, you know, this phase one of the pandemic is truly wrapping up. But I still think that there's such great messages and lessons we were able to squeeze out of this pandemic that are going to last a long time about communicating health needs when you're on the spectrum. And if you want to communicate with me further about this, you can contact me at my email address right here. And thank you so much for listening. Do you have any questions?